I use a combination. So I have a Tractor with 4 turntables going, and that's synced to an Ableton session. In Ableton, I'm running different effects, some clips, and lately, since the last couple of months, I've been running the Native Instruments Machina through there. You know, for me, the Machina right now, the Machina setup with Ableton is perfect. You know, like I said before, I like having some type of spontaneity. You know, you could create some really nice beats and sequences in Machine, save them in Ableton, so every time you bring up your session, it's there for you. And you use those like a DJ set, you use those as other records. But I'm using it just to kind of add things on over top. So if you can see in the DJ booth, I have the setup. I can quickly jump between hi-hats and claps and whatever sound. And I'm just sometimes purposely putting in things and sometimes just randomly, you know, hitting buttons until I get a groove that sounds good. And once it's done, I just erase it. I don't save anything and go with that. With a DJ set, there's a certain amount of pre-made information. You've got my records, everyone else's records, they're all loaded into Tractor. So there has to be some other spontaneity so it doesn't get, you know, boring. And that's what the Machina offers to me. It's also why I use Ableton as an effects processor other than just using the effects in Tractor, so that it adds a different element, you know. And that goes into another, I think, an interesting point of, you know, everything isn't just a digital output of one computer. I've got the effects from my Allen and Heath mixer going into Ableton, coming back out. There's feedback loops. This kind of gives you a different color of sound. Sometimes it distorts, sometimes you're pushing it, but this is all, you know, creates something unique. And that's what we were talking about earlier. Find a couple of pieces of equipment and try to get into that. You know, we all have something special inside of us, so we have to find out how we can get that through the technology and out the other end. And that Ableton, Tractor, you know, Allen and Heath setup, for me at this moment, feels like that's a great conduit for my ideas. Technically, it's quite complicated, the setup, but once it's all plugged in and going, it's relatively simple. And you know, that was one point I just wrote down. It's, you know, there's so many new things I want to do every year, or new plugins, but usually what we end up doing, you know, in January, February, and March, before the whole season really kicks off, I look around and see what's out there, and then kind of make a decision of what equipment I'm going to use that year. You know, it could be, you know, small changes, or if a huge big new thing comes out, I may adapt. But usually the setup at the beginning of the year is for that year, and that gives me time to really get into that. You know, if you see me in March and April, hopefully, you know, I've already practiced and it's cool. But by December, I really, you know, getting deep into the possibilities of that setup. You know, for me, that really works. You know, it's, you know, when I'm playing and I'm not looking at the buttons, and I'm just, you know, my hands are moving faster than I'm thinking about, that's when it feels good for me. And usually when it's feeling good for me, it's connecting to the people on the dance floor who are watching and listening to me. And you don't get there overnight. And it's not like I don't change the whole setup every year, so you're building upon, you know, these ideas, you know, for me over the last 18 years. Once I'm not thinking about what I'm doing, then probably I start spending that extra processing time thinking about what will be next for the next year. And then maybe I start doing little changes and things like that. You know, we were talking before and the word instrument came up. And of course, we all use more instruments than one. You know, we're not classic drum players or guitarists. We're technology players. And, you know, but you've got to find that, you know, unique setup. And then you've got to put time into it. Most people don't want to spend the time to become a master of anything right now. But, you know, when you do start getting closer to just doing and just being creative and stop thinking, that's when the magic happens, and when you take a step beyond the person next to you who just isn't spending that time, you know?
How do you relate your life sort of as a DJ, playing live, producing material that you're playing live. Those two things versus one another, are they different processes or are they related for you?
My show now, as the performance show, is now set up, you know, as my studio was when I was doing the most music possible. It was simple, and I could turn things on and just kind of go with it. And what I guess excites me now is the software and the technology is so powerful that there really is, you know, a possibility for us to get to these performance areas which are really, really spontaneous. And it's really, you know, for me, it's having the freedom and the creativity that I felt when I was locked away in a studio 20 years ago. You know, then it was, you know, then I felt really, it was a very intimate setting. I felt really intimate with my equipment, and I felt I could just go with it. And that's what I feel with Ableton and with my Tractor setup now. You know, the pre-planning is loading up tracks and some effects patches, but even with the machiner that I use as for drum loops, the only thing that's contained when I turn everything on is what was programmed last night. And then I just kind of go with that and just program, and you know, you're just getting an unedited kind of take on what would have happened 20 years ago with a 303 and a 909. You know, hopefully I have 20 years so that you don't get so many low points as I had when I was recording on the DAT back then. But that's, you know, that's the magic of what we're able to do now. You know, it's that spontaneity, and hopefully those quirks and that uniqueness that makes me sound like me.
If your question is about the barrier between performance and production, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that that barrier is actually new. Before there was digital tools to make, you know, finalized recordings of music, what you had was a recording device and a microphone or an input, and whether it was a drum machine or whether it was like an acoustic instrument or a person with a voice, what was put onto record or what was put onto tape or what was put onto a digital file, whatever it was a performance. And, you know, I think it's a bit of a dangerous illusion that hitting render is what makes a record. A record is a recording of something that happened, and it's really awesome. It's fantastic to be able to automate things that happen and push a bunch of buttons around and map it so that when you do hit render, things are happening. But it's when things happen that you've recorded that is something that's compelling, and that is a performance. So I think that boundary, it's always good to be aware of it, that, you know, when you're putting music into a computer to get a final product out of it, think about performing music into that computer. I mean, somebody asked me once, another producer, we were playing on the same line, on the same gig, and on the way to the show, he said, you know, what do you use to get that swing in your songs? And it's a valid thing. I mean, look, you can see on here I've got MIDI files of certain kinds of swing, and you know, Live 8 answered my prayers by making this groove engine, which allows you to capture the swing of an MPC. It's a totally valid question. Like, you know, a lot of people care a lot about how their machines groove and how particular machines do that and don't. But what I told him, which was honest, which was at the time totally true, most of the swing from a lot of my tracks was me. You know, it was me sitting with a keyboard playing the notes until it grooved the way that I wanted it to, and it wasn't locked into anything. It was that mind-body connection where you try to dissociate that barrier, and then you feel like when you're performing something, you're recording it.